First decided to weigh this just to see how much I could get out of it. The next step is to wash it because it probably still smells like a dog. I just use Dawn for this, but you can also use like a power scour product meant for wool. And dog hair will felt, so don't agitate it too much and don't get it too hot either. I just use lukewarm tap water for this. Once it's clean, you're gonna lay it flat to dry. It may take a few days to completely dry. It needs to be absolutely dry before the next step, which is drum carding. Now, if you don't have a drum carder, you can just use hand cards, but I prefer this because I have a lot of dog wool and it's time consuming. So I just run it through the drum carder, and this is after my first pass. Then I'm gonna take this tool called an awl, and I'm basically just gonna go along this line here and just start ripping this up. Don't ever use scissors, by the way. Just use an awl or a stick of some sort and just get that loose. And then we're gonna go ahead and peel this entire first pass off of the drum carder. And this is called a bat of fiber. And we're gonna have to run this through the drum carder a second time. But this is what it looks like, just FYI. I could spin it like this, but it would be kind of lumpy. Here's the first pass fiber again versus what it looks like before I drum carded at all. So now we're gonna go ahead and do our second pass of the drum carder. Now we're ready to go ahead and turn this into roving. So the tool I'm holding here is called a diz, and it's basically just a circle with a hole in it. And you're just gonna pull that through until you get sort of like a tube of fiber, and that's your roving. Here I'm just getting my wheel set up for spinning, just putting the drive band on and getting it ready. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start spinning this dog hair and turning it into yarn. And I'm basically just using a worsted drafting method here where I'm pinching all the air out. And here I'm showing you what it looks like when I release tension. It should coil back on itself once. That's how you know you have enough twist in the yarn. If it's over twisted, it will kink up and look really weird and corkscrew. So now I'm just gonna continue to keep drafting this until I have a crap ton of yarn on my bobbin. After a while of spinning, you're going to end up with a lot of yarn on the bobbin, and that's gonna cause it to be pretty heavy. So in order to keep things spinning with the correct amount of twist, you're gonna have to adjust the tension. And in my case, my wheel has a Scotch tension knob. Now here's what it looks like after I've completely finished spinning all of the dog hair. So we're not exactly finished here. Currently, this yarn just exists as a single ply, and I would like to ply this into a 3-ply or chain ply. So I'm going to go ahead and get my wheel set up for that. I've got a fresh empty bobbin on there, and I've got the leader yarn pulled through, ready to ply. So just pulling up my single ply yarn through the leader yarn loop, and then going to go ahead and put my drive band on the wheel and also adjust my tension by turning that knob there. Now we're going to go ahead and start making loops. We're basically just creating a chain. And we're going to spin in the counterclockwise direction because we spun our singles clockwise. So we're going to basically undo some of that twist that we put into the single ply by chain plying. So you make a loop and you pull the new yarn through and create a new loop and then pull more new yarn through, etc., and so forth. This is kind of similar to how you would crochet, actually. I think it might actually be the same thing, but anyways. You're going to just keep on doing that, and you can see the bobbin is starting to fill up with thicker yarn. So this is the single yarn plied back on itself 3 times over, so it's basically a 3-ply yarn. So this isn't the only way to do this. I could have also spun 3 separate bobbins full of single-ply yarn and then grabbed all 3 of those threads at once and spun those all together counterclockwise like I'm doing here. But I didn't have enough raw material to do that. So this method of plying is great for when you only have a small amount of raw material. So here I'm just demonstrating in a close-up view what I mean by creating 3 plies. I'm pulling that new loop through the old loop and creating a new loop with that yarn, and then just letting the twist enter that bundle of 3 threads. Once you're done, you're going to grab this tool called a nitty knotty, and you're going to go ahead and put your yarn on that tool down there, which is called a lazy Kate. I am not making this up. You're going to make a slip knot, and then that slip knot is going to go over one end of your nitty knotty, and you're going to pull that tight, and then you're just going to go ahead and start wrapping this around the nitty knotty, and I just can't really explain it. You just kind of have to watch. But this is so you can create one continuous circle of yarn without it getting tangled. It took me a few tries when I first got this tool to figure out how to do this. And this isn't the best instructional video either. It's not really meant to be. It's more just like an overview of the whole process, so you might want to Google to learn how. The next part of this involves making a figure 8 knot around one side of the yarn on the niddy noddy, and this is just to keep the yarn from getting tangled whenever you go to wash it, which is the next step after this. And I also like to go and make a figure 8 knot on pretty much all the other sides too, because you really don't want this to tangle. You worked so hard to make this, don't let it tangle. So before we wash this, I need to count the number of wraps, and there's actually a formula that I can use to calculate the approximate yardage based on the number of wraps that I'm counting here. And here I counted 28 wraps, so that would be about 46.5 yards. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove this yarn from the niddy noddy, and I'm going to take it downstairs so we can get it washed. Actually, before I wash, I will show how many wraps per inch this is. I was aiming for like 6 to 8, which would be considered like a bulky yarn, but I ended up with like 3 or 4 reps per inch, which is totally nutso. So this thing is like super ultra bulky, which means it's going to be a really fast hat to knit. All right, so now it's time to wash. I'm just putting a few pumps of Eucalan in there, which is a no-rinse detergent, and I am turning on the water and getting it sort of lukewarm. We don't want this super hot, because remember, dog fur can actually felt like wool. So just get it nice and sudsy, and then we're going to go ahead and put our freshly spun dog yarn in there, and this is actually going to help us set our twist, which is really important before we go to knit it, because we don't want it all energized and kinked up, and we want this to be a pleasurable experience. So that's why we like to wash our yarn before we knit with it. And I just let this soak in here for a couple hours. You can let it soak overnight if you want. It's really just whatever you have time for. After some time has elapsed, you're going to go ahead and take the yarn out and gently squeeze that excess water out. And there's no need to rinse if you use Eucalan or a similar detergent product. And then we're going to go ahead and take that and put it on a clean, dry towel on the floor. And we're going to go ahead and roll the yarn up with that towel. And then we're going to go ahead and basically like just squeeze the excess water out by either standing on the roll or just pushing down with our body weight. Like, it's all the extra water out. Then we're going to go ahead, unwrap that carefully and take it over to the hanger. And we're going to hang this up on a hanger and let it sit overnight to dry. I know it's tempting, but don't use a hairdryer, please. The next step in this process is to get our skein into ball form so that it doesn't tangle when we go to knit with it. I'm just trimming off the figure 8 knots here very carefully, and then I am just manually winding this into a ball. I do have a ball winder, but this yarn is too thick for it. So here's what the finished balls look like once wound. So finally we can get to the knitting here. I'm just deciding what size needles to use to knit this hat based on the wraps per inch. And I also have this handy needle index thing here, so I can double check if the numbers have worn off on the sizing. And here I'm just doing a quick test swatch to see what it looks like once knit. This has already been a pretty long video, so I'm not going to go into how to actually knit something, but this is just what it looks like. I'm using a circular needle attached to my interchangeable needles, and that lets me knit a tube or a cylinder basically. And just checking the stitches per inch here to make sure it looks how I want it to look. Here's just a look at the progress of knitting the hat. It's coming along pretty nicely. I did run out of dog fur though, so working on finishing this, but here's a close-up of the texture. It's really, really warm and fluffy, and it's very heavy too. Here's the finished hat. It's very heavy, and it weighs about 7 ounces or so. Damn near half a pound. It's just super warm and amazing, and yeah, I really hope the recipient loves this hat.